Remember Never Before is the fourth studio album by the awesome Canadian band July Talk. I was fortunate enough to listen to this one 2 days early. This album comes out on January 20th, this Friday. This record has 11 tracks. It is 41 minutes long and is, of course, released by Six Shooter Records. And as I mentioned, this album does come out in 2 days, so I am just so lucky to be sitting here talking to you about this awesome album, and I'm going to dive into everything you want to know with this song without saying too much about it because not everyone can listen to it right now. But my little background with July Talk is I honestly haven't listened to them for like a long time. I first heard them in guitar class last year and I was like, this is interesting. It wasn't my favorite thing right away, just because it was so different and off-putting, but I totally understand that's the point of it. But then I saw them open for Jack White back on August 19th at Budweiser Stage, and Jack White's like my idol. So I was there front row, directly in front of the bigger drum set, and they just blew me away. I mean, their stage antics are incredible, and after looking it up, I'm just like, okay, I totally see it, and I fully understood the connection, the weird Frankenstein's monster type movements and the way that the whole band correlates with each other. It's just something that you need to see. Like, I can't put it into words. And then I went back and over the past few weeks I've been listening to their albums. I listened to Touch quite a while ago, which is probably still my favorite of all theirs, but it's honestly pretty close with this one. There's a little spoiler there, but the first record is awesome. It has some classics on it. The Garden is great, Guns and Ammunition. I mean, there's so many great songs on that one. And then we have Touch, which is, as I said, probably my favorite one. Again, more classics on there, songs you look at it, you're like, this is great, kind of all the way down. And then 2020's Pray For It was a different step, a slower, less rock-filled step, but it really gave each member, especially the singers, a chance to shine in a whole other light. And now we have this record which takes it back to more of a rock, I don't want to say pop, because normally I say that as an insult. I don't mean that as an insult if I ever say it here, because it's just so well done. This is a great album. It has so many different sounds and feels like so many genres put into one, although it is a rock album above everything else. But what I normally do in these reviews is that I give my overview on the whole record, and then I go into each song individually because I believe that it gives you guys a deeper understanding of what I thought about it. If that isn't what you like, click off and wait for the album, but let's just talk about the whole record overall. So when comparing it to the other albums, I would say this is top tier. This is up there with Touch as one of their best. I just loved how each member, just like I mentioned on stage, can bounce off of each other even in the studio when everything's edited to perfection or whatever, it's performed and cut and all that, but still there's this whole band energy that is felt throughout this entire record. And despite if that's on a slower song like some of the ones later on, or if it's on, say, the opening track after this, some of these songs you might have heard just because they were released as singles, so you might know what I'm talking about. And I'd say the biggest thing that took me getting used to, but is probably my favorite thing about the band now, is the whole Leah and Peter vocal performances. I mean, Leah has a very, I don't want to say soft, but she has a higher voice, and then Peter has one of the most husky, deep voices I've heard, especially for this genre. So their connection is so different, but that's what makes July Talk so special. I mean, you won't hear anything like this, especially so consistently. And again, watching them on stage really gave me a whole other appreciation for the band, because now I feel like I know how they work, even though we don't know what the connection is between those two or between anybody else in the band. It provides some mystery there, I will admit. But when it comes to the actual music of this album, it is fantastic. I think there's really only one song that stands out as a weaker link here, which I will talk about later when I talk about all the songs specifically, but I could easily throw this album on and listen to the entire thing and enjoy it. I mean, on Friday, I'm going to go out and look for the vinyl record of it because I really want to listen to this one over and over and over again, because I feel there's so much to dive into. There's so many layers on a ton of these songs that maybe you won't notice that there's something that kind of sounds like bongos. It could be, I'm not 100% sure. Or there's hidden acoustic guitars in there, other layers of vocals that you're like, oh, I didn't expect you to be singing on this one. And whole other things like that, and maybe your focus is on the drumming here and you miss this one little fluttery guitar part. I mean, it's awesome. I just loved how full these tracks were. There were maybe a few times where it felt a little bit too convoluted, but that was very rare. And what I really love is that none of these songs really feel like one member's like, this is mine, everybody can back off. I mean, sometimes a specific member, let's say a drum opening, you're like, okay, I know it's going to be these two that I need to focus on. Or if it's a later on song, like the song Raw, I mean, you're like, yeah, this is Peter playing and singing and playing the piano and singing at the same time. You're like, okay, you focus on him, but I also hear little bits in the back. It's like, oh, that's Leah singing in there. So that's kind of what I mean. It doesn't feel like one of the members on each song is like, okay, this is my song. They all feel like it's a great group effort, which is something I really appreciate, especially coming from a 6-piece band. And as I mentioned before, this is a rock album, no doubt, but there are still hints of other genres here and there, which I also found really intriguing because every single song I went into, I didn't know what was coming next. After about 3 songs, I was like, okay, I totally understand this album is just going to be a mixture of so many things, and I love that. I mean, I don't like when I go into an album and I'm like, okay, I know what the next song's going to be. I know what the next song's going to be. Like, that's something that drives me crazy. I bet it drives all you crazy. So I was kind of always on the edge of my seat while listening to this one, just because every song felt slightly different and special. Even if I preferred this one to this one, I still enjoyed both of them because they each had something to offer. One tiny little complaint that I have, this is one of the very few, is that sometimes the vocals, not the performance or anything, but it's like the mixing of it, they place their voice a little bit too quiet or a little bit lower in the mix, which now when thinking back on it, I'm like, I understand that's probably part of it. Like, I feel like that's intentional because live, sometimes it was harder to hear the vocals, but I think that adds to the crazy atmosphere of some of these tracks. But for me, there were some times in some like pre-choruses or verses where I was trying to make out exactly what they were saying. Now, luckily, I had the lyrics to read along to as well, and you guys will if you have Apple Music, or probably buy the record, and you could find them online, obviously, but it was a little bit tough sometimes when I was just like, okay, what exactly are they saying? Because all these songs have such deep, rich meanings. That's something that the band has, always been. They've always been about very important issues. There's an awesome video of Leah Fay kicking out this terrible person at one of their shows who yelled something at her. And if you haven't seen it, just look it up. You'll definitely find it. But that's my one overall complaint with the album, is that there were a few tracks here and there where that happened, but honestly, I loved it. Now I want to jump into each of the tracks individually. I do this typically in all of my album reviews if I go in depth, just because, again, as I said, I feel like it provides a deeper understanding of the tracks without saying too much about them. So the album opens with After This, and it is a fiery song with a nice simple riff that transitions into some fluttery chords, and we also get a very familiar Leah and Peter back and forth performance. The lyrics seem to be about another chance, with the main line, I can't wait to get back on my feet. The bridge section has a nice combination of Peter's vocals with one of their guitars matching him. This is a great opener to the album and a great single. Certain Father opens with a funky industrial type instrumental, something that I think Nine Inch Nails would have done in the 90s. Peter's soft vocals are met really well with Leah's, as well as Spencer Krug's in the pre-chorus. I'm not sure if I said that name right, I'm not familiar with the artist, but holy, he did a great job here. The quick drum fills in the chorus add to the synth production of this track. The raspy vocals really help to propel this one as well. The bass and kick drum open up Human Side, and then they help build this song up to one unexpected chorus. There's a few rests in some interesting spots here, which really help pull in my interest. The song never feels repetitive though, because of how the groove slightly changes in the second verse, as well as a quieter acoustic guitar getting introduced in the second chorus. This is one of those songs though that I do wish the vocals were raised up a little bit more, just a few dBs in the pre-chorus section, because they got lost in the mix, although I do understand that is part of the whole vibe of some of these songs, for lack of a better term. Peter's echoing vocals begin Hold. This is an awesome experimental track with some spacey sound effects happening in the back. Peter and Leah have found essentially the perfect way to mix their vocals here. I mean, it's always been great, but this feels like a new best. I love the way they trade off their parts. The unique guitar solo also fits perfectly near the end of this slower track. Every member of the band has a moment to shine, even in the most subtle way. God Mother Fire, or GD Mother Fire, I'm not 100% sure, I think it's God Mother Fire, feels like a callback to their earlier days with some awesome feedback opening this song. Josh Warburton's hefty bass tone helps add some punch, while Ian Docherty's whipping single coil guitar part helps guide the listener. I can't forget to mention the awesome duo work from the drummers Dani Miles and Dani Nash as well. When You Stop caught my attention right away with really off-putting lead guitar part, which is exactly what this one needed. It climbs up and then drops way back down when you least expect it, but then another clean part is added in the right channel in the chorus. As always, the combination of vocals is flawless and the lyrical content really touched me. This is my favorite track from this album, I think. Silent Type features a tight groove that locked me in straight away. Peter's quick vocals help push this track forward until some expected things happen, but I won't say anything more. The quick snaps of the guitar, groovy bass line, and compact percussion help drive this one forward. At times, there's so much happening, all the way down to higher pitched percussion, I think bongos, and lead fuzz lines, but it never feels overdone. Also, every single song in history that says God herself gets an automatic thumbs up from me. That's also a Jack White reference. Peter and Leah start off 24 hours together with what sounds like a piano. Once again, Warburton's bass tone is just massive, and the husky part of Peter's voice is really the driving factor towards the choruses, and he hits notes that I haven't heard him hit before. This is not my favorite track. I feel like out of all of them, as good as it is definitely the weaker link, just because I feel like it gets too convoluted and crowded sometimes, but all the musicianship is totally on point. Repeat has a squeaky, atmospheric intro that is joined by a nice little drum groove. Even 9 songs into this record, when I hear all the other members strike their instruments, I get excited. Some of these lyrics bring up some very interesting thoughts, especially because of how Leah presents them. The visions that these songs create are also great. They're extremely visual songs with images of dark rooftops coming to my head. Raw begins exactly as you'd expect, a raw, unfiltered track with just Peter and his keys. Once again, the lyrical content is just so mesmerizing, and songs like this showcase how much this band can do. I'm a sucker for songs like this, so this is easily one of my favorite from their entire catalog. I Am Water finishes the album in a groovy way with some bass that pops. The EQ'd vocals are placed in a way where you can't not focus on them. The crazy energetic performance from the entire band helps bring the listener back up after the slow nature of the previous track. The jumpy bridge helps keep the energy while switching it up. This is a great ending to the album. I loved it. I think this album is amazing. It is possibly their best, although I want to go and then listen to Touch and then this one like kind of back to back on Friday. I will have a tier list or tier ranking, whatever you want to call it, of all their albums up on Saturday, and I really hope I can see the band live in London. I'm going to try to make my way to that front row again. That would just be awesome. I mean, this record is just so good, so full of energy, but just so full of so many unique factors, and it's something that should get millions more listens than it will. July Talk's Remember Never Before is up there with Touch as their best work yet. The smooth transitions between band members guide us through this record, even with its many changes of tone. Peter and Leah have perfectly found a connection with their back and forth performances. The other members are not to be overlooked though, with Warburton's huge bass tone, Docherty's quick riffs, and Miles and Nash's tight drumming. This is a day one listen. Do not miss out on it. I'm going to give Remember Never Before a 4.5 out of 5. Again, I just have to thank you for the person who sent me this one from their team. I mean, it means the world to me, especially as a Canadian who is not too far away from Toronto and will definitely be living there someday. There's just this whole other connection between me and the band, and I was playing their songs on guitar earlier when I found out I could listen to this album earlier. It was just one of those crazy coincidences. But if you've listened to this album, let me know what you think of it down below, or if you haven't, are you super excited for it? What do you think will be your favorite song? Have you listened to the singles? I think they're pretty awesome as well. Of course, they are featured here, and thank you all for watching. I will see you guys next time. Over and out.